Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of history's absolute greatest unsolved heists, and the honestly incredible modern quest to reclaim it. We're looking at a mystery here that spans well over a millennium. We've got an ancient king, the collapse of a massive empire, top-secret Nazi expeditions, and a modern Italian city trying to literally revive its fortunes using cutting-edge tech. It's a wild ride.
Okay, let's just picture this for a second. Try to imagine 10 massive wagons just overflowing with ancient wealth, completely vanishing from the face of the earth. Poof, gone. And we aren't talking about a few scattered coins in some sunken pirate ship here. We are talking about the concentrated wealth of the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen suddenly wiped off the map. So how does that even happen? Well, to understand this staggering loss, we have to travel all the way back to 410 AD, when the unthinkable actually happened.
That brings us to Section 1, the Fall of Rome, August 410 AD.
Right, so setting the scene. At the end of the 4th century, the supposedly invincible Western Roman Empire was, well, it was highly unstable. The Goths were actually seeking refuge from the Huns at the time, but they were heavily exploited and terribly mistreated by the Romans. They were facing starvation, crippling taxes, you name it. So King Alaric led a rebellion. After a bunch of violated truces and totally failed negotiations, Alaric's forces finally breached the mighty walls of Rome in August of 410 AD, and for 3 days they completely ransacked the city. It was an event that literally sent shockwaves through the entire ancient world. It basically marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire.
And this perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of the heist. Alaric didn't just grab shiny metals. He took massive amounts of highly precious commodities. Sure, 2 tons of solid gold and 13 tons of silver are staggering on their own, but to put things into perspective, back then, 3,000 pounds of pepper and 4,000 silk tunics, that represented astronomical, almost unimaginable wealth. It's like having a warehouse full of flawless diamonds today. There's even a really persistent historical rumor that this haul included the sacred Jewish menorah, which the Romans had originally looted from the Second Temple in Jerusalem.
Moving right along to Section 2, a secret river tomb buried underwater.
Here's the crazy part, though. Alaric didn't actually live to enjoy this massive haul. He died of a sudden illness just shortly after the siege, which leads us to what is honestly an engineering marvel of a cover-up. According to the 6th century historian Jordanes, the Visigoths went to extreme lengths to protect their king's tomb. Down in the city of Cosenza, they forced a huge band of captive slaves to physically divert the raging Busento River. Think about that. Then right there in the dry riverbed, they dug a massive pit, buried King Alaric along with his 15 tons of precious loot, and then just released the river back into its natural channel. And to make absolutely sure the secret was sealed forever, they brutally slaughtered every single captive who worked on the dig. Brutally clinical.
Which takes us to Section 3, the Nazi treasure hunt and Himmler's obsession.
Now, you'd think 15 tons of gold sitting right under an Italian riverbed would be found pretty quickly, right? Nope. For centuries, the legend of Alaric's river tomb has drawn treasure hunters like a magnet, and they've all come up empty. In the mid-18th century, a massive local excavation found absolutely nothing. In the 19th century, a major earthquake actually temporarily drained the river, and the famous writer Alexander Dumas, the guy who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, he actually visited Cosenza and wrote about watching crowds of people just fervently digging in the mud, finding nothing. But for sure, the most chilling chapter of this hunt happened in the 20th century.
The reason behind that 1940 search was actually deeply ideological. Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler weren't just looking for gold to fund their war machine, although, that was definitely part of it. They were actually deeply obsessed with the occult, ancient myths, and esoteric history. Himmler genuinely believed that finding artifacts like Alaric's loot or the Holy Grail would somehow historically or mathematically prove their horrific theories of Aryan supremacy. They literally sent a team of SS archaeologists down to Cosenza. But, just like everyone else before them, the Third Reich search failed entirely.
Let's jump to Section 4, the modern tech search, a true 21st century hunt.
Fast forward to 2015. The local government of Cosenza decided it was time to tackle this ancient cold case, but this time with 21st century tech. Where centuries of picks and shovels had failed, the city hoped modern science would finally crack it. Mayor Mario Acciuto spearheaded an official campaign, bringing in experts to sweep the river confluence with cutting-edge ground-penetrating radar and aerial drones. The whole shebang. And the stakes? They were incredibly high. Cosenza was facing some real economic struggles at the time. The mayor's vision was crystal clear.
If they could pinpoint that physical loot, the resulting museum and historical site would bring in hordes of tourists and totally revitalize the region's economy.
And that leads us directly into Section 5, Virtual Reality. The myth lives on.
Well, the physical search stalled. They didn't find those 10 wagons of gold, but the city realized something really profound in the process. They didn't actually need the physical gold to capitalize on the legend. So Cosenza pivoted, and honestly they pivoted brilliantly. They secured funding to build the Cosenza Iterera Multimedia Museum. Because they lacked the physical gold, they just replaced traditional glass display cases with state-of-the-art storytelling. Inside, they built this interactive magic book exhibit. It uses glowing, beautiful projections to dynamically tell the story of the Visigoths, narrated by Byzantine historians and classical poets. So instead of standing over some muddy, uncertain excavation site in the rain, tourists are invited to just sit in comfortable chairs and put on pristine VR headsets, and they are instantly transported. You can fly over the roofs of the old town, witness the 410 AD sack of Rome firsthand, and just immerse yourself entirely in the legend. It's an incredibly successful edutainment experience. They effectively monetize the story of Alaric without needing a single ounce of his actual silver.
But we do have to talk about Section 6, the reality check. Myth versus reality.
Because stepping out of that beautifully curated virtual reality museum and walking down to the actual physical riverbed, it's a deeply jarring experience. Down at the confluence of the two rivers, there is a striking modern bronze monument created to honor the myth. It depicts Alaric standing on his horse, but check this out. The horse has no legs. It's supported entirely by stilts, which symbolizes a wounded warrior returning from a devastating battle. It's a really powerful piece of art, but its immediate surroundings tell a very different, much grittier story.
This is the stark reality that tourists encounter today. It's this wild contrast. On one hand, you have the digital myth, this clean, glorious, immersive, high-tech museum experience celebrating the rich history. But on the exact opposite hand, the physical reality right around the actual monument is often described by visitors as, frankly, an open-air disappointment. People report walking through the rubble of unfinished hotel construction, navigating dirty, poorly maintained riverbanks scattered with debris, and even syringes. It just feels like a forgotten corner of the city, sitting right there in sharp contrast to those glowing projections just up the hill.
So what should we take away from all of this? Ultimately, we have to ask ourselves a pretty fascinating question about this 1,500-year-old mystery. If the legend alone, just the mere idea of a buried king and his 10 wagons of gold, if that idea is powerful enough to fund virtual reality museums, inspire artists, and draw curious tourists from around the entire globe, does it even really matter if the actual gold stays buried in the mud? Has the myth of Alaric's treasure finally become more valuable than the gold itself? Think about that for a bit, and we'll see you in the next explainer.